Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her hand against the pristine white wall of Healing Station Theta 9, marveling at how the metal felt warm despite the cold vastness of space surrounding them. Her first day as Earth's medical representative had started normally enough, with introductions to various alien species whose names she practiced silently to herself. The Sixen with their translucent skin, the crystalline Crix, and the towering Mirians all nodded politely as she passed. The station's artificial gravity maintained a comfortable 0.8 Earth standard, chosen as a compromise for the dozen different species that called the station home. Sarah had just finished organizing her quarters when the first tremor hit. The sensation reminded her of earthquakes back in California, except this time the shaking came with a high-pitched whine from deep within the station's core. "Attention all medical personnel," the station's AI announced in 15 different languages simultaneously. "Gravity system malfunction detected. Prepare for potential fluctuations." Sarah's stomach lurched as the gravity dropped to 0.3 standard. Around her, lighter objects began floating upward. She grabbed a handrail, thankful for the mandatory zero training Earth had required. Down the corridor, she heard the distinctive crystalline chiming of a Crix in distress. Without hesitation, Sarah pushed off the wall, gliding toward the sound. She found a young Crix patient hovering near the ceiling, their crystalline appendages tinkling in panic. Unlike humans, Crix couldn't survive sudden gravity changes. Their crystalline structure could shatter. "I'm here to help," Sarah called out, using her basic Crix trade speak. "Try to remain still." The gravity shifted again, this time spiking to 1.2 standard. Sarah saw the Crix patient beginning to fall and made a split-second decision. She pushed off the wall with all her strength, intercepting the patient mid-fall. They collided with the opposite wall, but Sarah twisted to absorb the impact with her left arm, keeping the Crix's fragile form protected. The crack of bone was audible even over the station's warning sirens. Pain shot through Sarah's arm, but she maintained her hold on the Crix patient until the gravity stabilized. Medical teams rushed in moments later, led by Chief Medical Officer Dr. Zixtal, their four eyes widening at the scene. "Patient status?" Dr. Zixtal demanded, their translator rendering the clicks and whistles into standard English. "The Crix is unharmed," Sarah reported through gritted teeth. "Though I could use some assistance myself." The medical team carefully separated Sarah from the Crix patient. Dr. Zixtal's medical scanner hummed as it passed over Sarah's arm, projecting a holographic image of the clean break in her ulna. The alien medical staff's reaction surprised her. They backed away as if she had suddenly become radioactive. "Terminal injury?" One of the junior doctors whispered in their native tongue, forgetting Sarah's translator could pick it up. "No, just a simple break," Sarah explained, trying to keep her voice steady despite the pain. "Basic human medical care will have me functional again in a few weeks." The alien doctors exchanged looks of disbelief. In their experience, skeletal injuries were career-ending catastrophes. The concept of bones healing completely was foreign to most spacefaring species, whose evolution had taken very different paths from Earth's. "You will require immediate retirement and cybernetic replacement," Dr. Zixtal stated matter-of-factly, already pulling up the relevant forms on their datapad. Sarah couldn't help but laugh, then winced as the movement jostled her arm. "Actually, I'll just need a cast and some pain medication. I can return to light duty tomorrow." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft peeping of medical equipment and the distant sound of repair crews working on the gravity systems. Sarah realized that her injury might teach these advanced alien doctors something new about humans, though she had no idea just how profound that lesson would become. The following morning, Sarah arrived at her station with her left arm encased in a lightweight cast. The medical bay fell silent as she entered, her alien colleagues watching with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Dr. Zixtal approached, all four eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sign of distress in their species. "Dr. Chen, your presence is unnecessary. Station protocols clearly state that skeletal damage requires immediate medical retirement." They insisted, mandibles clicking with worry. Sarah adjusted her tablet with her good hand and pulled up her morning schedule. On Earth, we have a saying, "Time and bones wait for no one." I have patience to see. The first challenge came during her rounds. A Mirian child had developed an unusual rash that required detailed documentation. Sarah balanced her tablet against the edge of the bed and began typing one-handed, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. The Mirian parent watched in fascination as she completed the task without complaint. "Does the broken bone not cause you great suffering?" they asked, their translators struggling with the concept. "It's manageable," Sarah replied, finishing her notes. "Humans have remarkable pain tolerance when necessary. Speaking of which, this rash should clear up with the treatment I'm prescribing." Throughout the day, Sarah adapted. She learned to brace her tablet against her cast while writing, developed a new technique for handling medical scanners one-handed, and even performed a minor procedure on a sick patient whose translucent skin made the operation relatively straightforward. Word spread through the station. Avian medical students began following her around, recording her movements and taking notes. They were particularly fascinated by how she modified standard procedures to work around her injury. To them, this level of adaptation was unprecedented. During her lunch break, Sarah noticed Dr. Zixtal watching her from across the cafeteria. The chief medical officer was engaged in an intense discussion with several senior doctors. Their translator turned off for privacy. She could tell by their gestures that she was the topic of conversation. Later that afternoon, while Sarah was updating patient records, Dr. Zixtal entered her office carrying a sophisticated scanning device she didn't recognize. "Dr. Chen, would you permit a detailed bone density scan? It's for my personal research." Sarah extended her injured arm. "Of course, though I should warn you, the healing process has barely begun." The scanner hummed as it passed over her cast, projecting a three-dimensional image of the break. Dr. Zixtal's eyes widened, and they quickly adjusted several settings. "This is remarkable," they whispered. "The bone is already showing signs of callus formation, and these readings." They trailed off, mandibles twitching in excitement. "Standard human healing response," Sarah explained. "The break site will actually end up stronger than the original bone once it's fully healed." Dr. Zixtal nearly dropped the scanner. "Stronger? This defies all known medical principles. In every spacefaring species we've encountered, broken bones heal with reduced density if they heal at all." Sarah hadn't realized this was unusual. She pulled up some basic human medical text on her tablet and showed Dr. Zixtal diagrams of the bone remodeling process. "See? The osteoblasts and osteoclasts work together too." She stopped, noticing that Dr. Zixtal was trembling slightly, their species' response to profound revelation. "Dr. Chen," they said slowly, "I believe we have severely underestimated human medical potential. Would you be willing to participate in a more detailed study? This could revolutionize our understanding of skeletal healing across all species." Sarah smiled, remembering how her own fascination with alien biology had led her to this posting. "I'd be honored, though I hope you don't mind if I keep working while you study me. I have a rather full schedule tomorrow." Dr. Zixtal's translator struggled to convey their laugh. "I believe that's exactly what we need to study." News of Sarah's remarkable healing spread through Theta 9 like a solar flare. The station's research wing, normally focused on cataloging new species' medical needs, had turned their attention to studying human bone remodeling. Sarah found herself at the center of an impromptu research team, with Dr. Zixtal leading the investigation. "Explain again about these microfractures you mentioned," Dr. Zixtal asked, gesturing at the holographic display of human bone structure floating between them. The research lab had been converted into a temporary lecture hall, with medical specialists from 6 different species in attendance. Sarah pointed to the image with her good hand. When humans exercised, particularly during high-impact activities, our bones develop tiny stress fractures. Instead of weakening the bone, these micro-injuries trigger a healing response that makes the bone denser and stronger. A Crix researcher chimed in, their crystalline form reflecting the hologram's light. You deliberately damage yourselves to become stronger. This seems counterintuitive. Sarah suggested, nature often works in surprising ways. Consider how your own species grows stronger crystal lattices after exposure to specific radiation frequencies. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Neltak, the station's expert in evolutionary medicine. The tall, serpentine alien slithered into the room carrying a data crystal containing Earth's evolutionary history. Fascinating data, Dr. Chen, Neltak hissed excitedly. Your species evolved on a high-gravity world with frequent falls and impacts, while other species developed external protection or avoided damage entirely. Humans adapted to repair and strengthen themselves after injury. The hologram shifted to show human evolutionary history. Sarah watched her colleagues' reactions as they observed reconstructions of ancient humans recovering from injuries that would have permanently disabled their own species. But surely this healing has limits? Asked a junior doctor from the Mirian delegation. Sarah nodded. Of course. Severe breaks, especially compound fractures, require immediate medical attention. However, the basic principle remains. Properly treated breaks often heal stronger than before. Dr. Zixtol's next question surprised her. What about preventative applications? Could controlled damage promote strengthening without waiting for accidents? We already do that, Sarah replied. Athletic training, particularly in sports like running and martial arts, deliberately stresses bones to trigger strengthening. Even our space programs include impact exercises to prevent bone loss in zero gravity. The research team spent hours analyzing human medical records. They were particularly intrigued by cases of children bouncing back from injuries that would be life-altering for other species, and athletes returning to peak performance after breaks. Late into the station's night cycle, Dr. Zixtol made an unexpected request. Dr. Chen, would you permit us to take a sample of your healing bone tissue? We detected unusual cellular activity at the break site. Sarah agreed, and the sample revealed something extraordinary. Under the station's quantum microscopes, they observed the complex dance of human bone cells breaking down and rebuilding the injury site, creating structures more resilient than the original bone. This is revolutionary, Dr. Neltak declared, reviewing the data. Your osteoblasts don't just repair damage, they improve upon the original design. They learn from the break pattern to prevent similar injuries in the future. As Sarah prepared to leave the lab, she noticed Dr. Zixtol staring intently at the test results. Something on your mind? She asked. I'm wondering, they replied slowly, if we could adapt this process for other species. Many races suffer from brittle bone conditions that we've never been able to treat effectively. Sarah looked at her healing arm, then at the eager faces of her alien colleagues. That's an interesting hypothesis. Where would you suggest we start? Before Dr. Zixtol could respond, the station's emergency alert system activated. A priority message from the Centauri system flashed across all screens. Mining colony disaster. Multiple skeletal injuries. Requesting immediate medical assistance. Dr. Zixtol's four eyes met Sarah's. Perhaps we're about to find out. The emergency transport ship rocketed through space toward New Centauri, carrying Sarah, Dr. Zixtol, and a team of specialists from Theta 9. Sarah studied the disaster reports on her tablet, her newly healed arm aching in sympathy as she read the details. A massive processing facility had collapsed during peak shift, its gravity regulators failing catastrophically. Hundreds of Crix miners had been caught in the disaster, their crystalline bodies shattered by the sudden gravitational forces. Traditional emergency care was keeping them alive, but their prognosis was grim. The Crix were never meant to endure such forces. Dr. Zixtol explained, their mandibles clicking anxiously. Their entire civilization developed in low-gravity environments. Their bodies literally cannot conceptualize this type of trauma. Sarah watched the approaching mining colony through the ship's viewport. New Centauri's 3 moons cast shifting shadows across the facility's damaged dome. How many injured? 342 with severe skeletal damage, Dr. Zixtel replied. Another 100 with minor crystalline fractures. Without intervention, none of the severe cases will ever work again. For the Cricks. That's a fate worse than death, Sarah finished. The Cricks defined their entire society through their work, their crystalline bodies literally shaped by their chosen professions. The transport ship docked at the colony's medical center. Sarah's first impression was one of sound, the haunting chiming of hundreds of injured Cricks, their fractured bodies producing discordant notes with every movement. The sight that followed was worse. Entire wards filled with Cricks miners whose once beautiful crystalline forms were now webbed with cracks and fractures. A local doctor approached, their own crystalline form dulled with exhaustion. The stabilizing treatments aren't working. The breaks, they're too complex. The crystal won't regrow properly. Sarah moved from bed to bed, examining the injuries. Her mind raced back to the research they'd been conducting on human bone healing. The Cricks weren't so different in some ways. Their bodies were mineral-based, capable of growth and repair, but they lacked the adaptive response that made human healing so effective. Dr. Zixtal, she called out suddenly. Remember how you asked about preventative applications? What if we approached this from the opposite direction? The chief medical officer hurried over, all four eyes focused intently. Sarah pulled up the scan of her own healed break on a nearby monitor. Look at the remodeling pattern, she continued. Our bones don't just grow back. They create new stress patterns based on the break. What if we could induce something similar in crystalline structures? A young Cricks miner on the nearby bed chimed softly, drawing their attention. You mean deliberately reshape our growth? Like cutting a gemstone? Sarah nodded excitedly. Exactly. Instead of trying to restore the original pattern, we guide the crystal to grow back stronger. The Cricks already use sonic resonance for healing minor damage. What if we amplified that, combined it with targeted stress patterns? Dr. Zixtal's mandibles quivered with sudden understanding. Like your microfractures, but precisely controlled. It's never been attempted on this scale, but theoretically. We'd need volunteers, Sarah said, looking around the ward. It would be experimental, possibly painful, and success isn't guaranteed. The young miner's crystalline form caught the light as they struggled to sit up. I volunteer. In the deep mines, we have a saying, pressure creates beauty, if there's even a chance. Other miners began chiming in agreement, their combined voices creating an ethereal chorus of hope. Dr. Zixtal turned to Sarah, their translators struggling to convey the complexity of their tone. It seems, Dr. Chen, that your broken arm may end up healing far more than just yourself. The new Centauri Medical Center's conference room buzzed with tension as Sarah presented her treatment proposal. Holograms danced in the air, showing complex patterns of crystal growth alongside human bone healing processes. The colony's medical board, a mix of various species, watched with expressions ranging from intrigue to horror. You want to deliberately stress already damaged crystalline structures. The head of the medical board, a senior Marian doctor, swayed their elongated neck in disbelief. The Cricks miners have suffered enough. Sarah stood her ground, pointing to the success rates of human bone healing. Nature has already proven this principle. When human bones break and heal properly, the repair site becomes stronger than the original bone. We can adapt this process for Cricks physiology. Dr. Zixtal stepped forward, their four eyes focused on the detailed scans. The sonic resonance patterns Dr. Chen proposes mirror the natural stress lines in healed human bones. We've already conducted preliminary tests on non-organic crystals with promising results. A Cricks medical specialist chimed softly, their crystalline form reflecting rainbow patterns across the room. But we are not simple crystals. Our bodies are living matrices of mineral and energy. The risk of complete structural failure is already at 100% for the severe cases. Sarah interrupted gently. Without intervention, these miners will never fully heal. Their crystal matrices will remain fractured, unable to support their own weight under standard gravity. The young miner who had first volunteered Kexley asked to address the board. Their damaged form required support from a hovering medical platform, the cracks in their crystal structure creating discordant notes with each movement. In the deep mines, Kexley began, their translator rendering the chimes into words. We seek out flaws in crystal formations, not to discard them, but to understand how they can be transformed into something stronger. Our ancestors learned that properly cut crystals could bear greater loads than solid ones. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. It's the same principle. We're not just trying to patch the breaks. We're going to guide them into forming stronger patterns. She brought up a new hologram showing the proposed treatment stages. The first phase uses modified sonic resonance to map the break patterns, she explained. Then we apply carefully calibrated stress points while the crystal repairs itself. The healing matrix will follow these new stress lines, creating a stronger internal structure. Dr. Zixtel displayed the results from their preliminary tests. The reinforced crystal samples showed a 40% increase in structural integrity compared to their original state. With living crystal, the potential improvement could be even greater. The board members murmured among themselves, their various translators creating a symphony of overlapping languages. Finally, the head of the board raised a hand for silence. The risk is significant, they stated, but the potential benefit. They turned to Kexley. You understand that this treatment could cause intense discomfort. There's no guarantee of success. Kexley's crystal structure rang with determination. Every mineral deposit teaches us something new. I am ready to be this lesson. The board deliberated for what felt like hours. Sarah found herself holding her breath, her recently healed arm a reminder of how much was at stake. Finally, they reached their decision. We approve the experimental treatment for volunteer patients only, the board had announced. Start with a small test group. If successful, we can expand the program. As the board members filed out, Dr. Zixtel turned to Sarah. We should begin immediately. The longer we wait, the more the current break patterns will set. Sarah looked at Kexley, whose crystalline form somehow managed to convey both fear and hope. Let's make history, she said, pulling up the treatment protocols on her tablet. Though perhaps we should start with something smaller than history. Let's make one minor hole again first. The treatment chamber hummed with energy as Sarah and Dr. Zixtel made final adjustments to their equipment. Kexley floated in the center, suspended in a zero-gravity field that took the strain off their fractured crystal structure. Rings of sonic emitters surrounded them, ready to begin the experimental procedure. Life signs are stable, Dr. Zixtel reported, all four eyes monitoring different displays. Crystal resonance patterns are within expected parameters. They paused, mandibles clicking softly. Are you certain about starting with the leg fractures? The arm damage might be safer. The leg breaks are cleaner, Sarah replied, adjusting the sonic frequency. More similar to my own break pattern. Besides, walking again means everything to Kexley. She turned to their patient. Are you ready? Kexley's crystalline form caught the light, the fractures creating a web of rainbow refractions. My family has worked the deep mines for 7 generations. We do not fear the unknown depths. Sarah initiated the first phase. The sonic emitters activated, sending carefully calibrated waves through Kexley's crystal matrix. The chamber filled with an ethereal chiming as the waves mapped every crack and fissure. 3-dimensional images appear on the surrounding screens, showing the damage in stark detail. Beginning stress pattern implementation, Sarah announced. She had spent hours studying human bone remodeling patterns, adapting them for crystalline structures. The sonic waves shifted, now applying gentle pressure at specific points along the break lines. Kexley chimed sharply, their whole form vibrating. The sensation, it's like the deep mine pressures, but from inside. Dr. Zixtel moved to abort the procedure, but Sarah held up her hand. That's exactly what we want. Remember how human bones respond to stress. They rebuild themselves stronger along the pressure points. The minutes stretched into hours. Sarah and Dr. Zixtel took turns monitoring the equipment, making micro-adjustments based on Kexley's reactions. Other medical staff gathered at the observation window, watching in fascination as the treatment progressed. Near the end of the 4th hour, Sarah noticed something on the displays. "Look at these readings," she called to Dr. Zixtal. "The crystal matrix is responding. It's not just healing, it's restructuring itself along the new stress lines." The images showed delicate lattices forming within the breaks, creating patterns more complex than the original crystal structure. They resembled the microscopic structures that had made Sarah's healed bone stronger than before. "Remarkable," Dr. Zixtal whispered. "The living crystal is adapting, learning from the stress patterns, just like your bones did." Finally, after 6 intense hours, the procedure was complete. The sonic emitters powered down, leaving behind an expectant silence. Sarah and Dr. Zixtal approached their patient, scanners ready. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked, studying the readings. Kexley's voice chimed with a new resonance. "Different. The discordant notes are gone from my leg structures." They hesitated. "May I try to stand?" Sarah looked at Dr. Zixtal, who nodded after checking the final scans. They slowly decreased the zero-gravity field, letting Kexley take their own weight for the first time since the mining accident. Kexley's crystalline feet touched the floor. Their leg structures, now laced with intricate new patterns, held firm. The young miner took one step, then another. Each movement produced clear, harmonious tones, the sound of perfectly aligned crystal. "The strength has returned," Kexley chimed joyfully. "But it's more than that. These new patterns, they feel more resilient, like the difference between raw crystal and a properly cut gem." Sarah smiled, remembering her own recovery. "That's exactly right. Your body hasn't just healed, it's rebuilt itself better than before." She turned to Dr. Zixtal, whose mandibles were quivering with excitement. "Shall we prepare for the next volunteer?" Word of Kexley's successful treatment spread through the mining colony like a crystal resonance wave. Within days, the medical center's halls filled with the harmonious chiming of healing Crix miners. Each successful procedure revealed new patterns of crystal growth, each patient's body responding uniquely to the adapted human healing process. Sarah stood in the observation room, watching as Dr. Zixtal supervised 3 treatments simultaneously. The sonic chambers hummed with energy, creating intricate lattices within damaged crystal structures. On nearby screens, detailed scans showed the beautiful complexity of the healing patterns. "The latest results are beyond our initial projections," Dr. Zixtal reported, their excitement evident in the rapid blinking of all 4 eyes. "The reinforced crystal matrices are showing an average strength increase of 63%. Some patients are developing entirely new growth patterns we've never seen before." Kexley, now walking smoothly through the medical center halls, had become their unofficial patient coordinator. Their crystalline form gleamed with new patterns that caught the light in mesmerizing ways, drawing interested stares from visiting medical specialists. "The deep mine crews are calling it star-forged crystal," Kexley explained, gesturing to their transformed leg structures. "They say the patterns look like starlight trapped in mineral form. Many are asking if the treatment could be used preventatively, before injuries occur." Sarah was examining a particularly intricate growth pattern when an urgent message arrived from the Galactic Medical Council. The Council's holographic representatives materialized in the observation room, their varied forms indicating the breadth of species interested in their work. "We've reviewed the preliminary data from your treatment program," the Council had began. "The implications extend far beyond the Crix species. We've received inquiries from 17 different races about adapting this methodology for their own skeletal structures." Dr. Zixtal displayed the latest scan results. "The principle appears universal. By understanding how human bones strengthen after injury, we've discovered a fundamental pattern of biological adaptation. Living structures can be guided to rebuild themselves stronger than before." A Mirian council member swayed forward. "The applications are staggering. Our species has always struggled with bone density loss in space. If we could adapt this treatment, It's already happening naturally, Sarah interjected, pulling up her own medical scans. Look at these stress patterns. They're mathematically similar across completely different biological structures. My healed bone, Kexley's reinforced crystal matrix, even the preliminary tests on Merian calcium structures, they all follow related strengthening patterns. The council chambers erupted in excited discussion. Sarah caught fragments of conversation about new medical research divisions, training programs, and adaptation protocols for different species. But her attention was drawn to a group of newly treated miners practicing their crystal songs together. The miners' reinforced structures produced richer, more complex tones than traditional Crick's crystal forms. Their songs spoke of transformation, of beauty born from damage, of strength found in healing. The music drew others to the chamber, creating an impromptu gathering of patients and medical staff. Listen to that harmony, Kexley chimed softly. Before the accident, our crystal songs were simple and separate. Now we can create new resonances together. The patterns that made us stronger also made us more connected. Dr. Zixtel turned all four eyes to Sarah. When you first arrived at Theta 9 with your broken arm, we thought we were seeing weakness. Instead, you showed us that adaptation after injury isn't just about survival, it's about evolution. Each break, each healing, is an opportunity to become something more. Sarah watched as another group of miners entered the sonic chambers, their damaged crystals ready for transformation. We're not just healing injuries anymore, she said. We're learning how life itself grows stronger through adversity. One standard year later, Sarah stood in Theta 9's newly established Adaptive Medicine Center, watching as students from 24 species studied the principles of regenerative healing. The medical bay had been transformed, now filled with treatment chambers adapting human healing patterns for various anatomies. A familiar crystalline chiming drew her attention. Kexley, now the lead patient advocate for the program, entered the room accompanying a young Crick's athlete. The athlete's crystal structure showed the distinctive reinforced patterns of preventative treatment, optimized for competitive performance. Dr. Chen, Kexley chimed warmly, their form resonating with pride. This is Vexina. They're competing in the upcoming Galactic Athletics Championship, the first Cricks to qualify in high-gravity events. Vexma's crystal matrix caught the light, revealing layers of carefully strengthened patterns. The human-inspired treatments changed everything, they explained, demonstrating a complex movement that would have shattered untreated crystal. Our coaches now incorporate controlled stress patterns into our training. We're reaching performance levels we never thought possible. Dr. Zixtel joined them, their four eyes scanning a holographic display of new treatment protocols. The applications keep expanding. The Merians have adapted the process for their calcium-based structures. The Exixen are using modified versions for their translucent tissues, and even the gaseous Helfer have found ways to strengthen their containment matrices using similar principles. Sarah smiled, remembering her own broken arm that had started it all. How are the deep mine crews doing? See for yourself, Kexley replied, activating a large view screen. The display showed Crick's miners working in previously impossible conditions, their reinforced crystal structures handling pressures that would have been devastating before. But more striking was their work itself. They moved with newfound confidence, their crystal songs creating complex harmonies that echoed through the deep mines. We've started calling it adaptive resonance, Kexley explained. The idea that stress and healing can create something more beautiful than the original. It's changing how we think about everything, not just our bodies. A group of medical students gathered around them, their diverse forms reflecting the spread of the new medical science. Sarah recognized species from across the galaxy, each bringing their own biological perspectives to the study of adaptive healing. Professor, a young Marian student called out, their long necks swaying excitedly. We've been studying the mathematical patterns in human bone remodeling. The same golden ratio appears in Crick's crystal formation and our own calcium structures. It's like the universe wrote the same healing song in different languages. Dr. Zixtel clicked their mandibles in agreement. That's the true breakthrough, isn't it? Not just that humans heal stronger after breaks, but that this principle reflects something fundamental about life itself. The ability to adapt, to transform damage into strength, to evolve through adversity. Sarah watched as Vexena demonstrated their athletic routine, their crystal form moving with fluid grace that seemed to defy physics. In the treatment chambers nearby, patients of various species underwent procedures that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The medical bay rang with the sounds of healing, Crick's crystal songs, Marian harmonic therapy, the hum of adaptive resonance chambers. When I first arrived here with a broken arm, Sarah said, "You all thought it was a career-ending injury. Now look at us. We're not just healing injuries, we're discovering new possibilities for every species." Kexley chimed softly, creating a harmony that spread through the crystal structures of nearby cricks. In the deep mines, we say that pressure reveals the true nature of things. Perhaps that broken arm revealed something about all of us, that our greatest strength lies not in avoiding breaks, but in how we grow stronger from them. As if in response, the crystal songs of the healed miners echoed through the station, their enhanced resonance carrying a message of transformation. In their harmony, Sarah heard the future of medicine, not just the treatment of injury, but the discovery of strength in unexpected places, the evolution of healing itself.